What is up, everybody? It's Dr. Vibe here, host and producer of the award-winning Dr. Vibe Show, the home of Epic Conversations, and I'm the host of Epic Conversations 2020 Best Podcast News Award winner, 2018 Innovation Award winner. That will come into some prominence in a few moments. There's a connection here tonight with those two. Well, yeah, there is a connection with those awards. Also, I host the only online show in the world for fathers and dads. It's sponsored by Dove Men Care. It's also co-sponsored by Dad Central. And actually, we're broadcasting live here on April 20th. I had the pleasure earlier on today of interviewing two really important sports people in Canadian media. One gentleman named Jack Armstrong. If you watch any of the Toronto Raptors, he's a color commentator for TSN for the Toronto Raptors. He also does a lot of stuff also for NBA TV. And I also had Donovan Bennett, who is a contributor at Sportsnet. And we had a great conversation about fatherhood. So if you want to get access to that conversation, touch base with me. I'll make sure you get it. They were fantastic. They hit out of the park. We had a lot of fun. But let's forget about that. I do one other thing amongst other things these days. I also am the board chair of an organization called the Global Food and Drink Initiative. It's a multimedia not-for-profit that is showcasing Blacks in the diaspora that are involved in food, wine, and travel. As always, I'd like to say you're blessed, highly favored, a magnet for miracles, and a solution for someone's problem. Thank you, everyone, just right from the beginning, who are watching live or watching on the replay or going to be listening to the replay. I love bringing new people onto the Dr. Vibe Show. If you've been around a bit, you know I like doing that. Now, this young lady, a few months ago, reached out to me and saying, Dr. Vibe, I'd like to interview you. And I go, you don't have an exciting life. Why would you want to interview me? So joking aside, she wanted to interview me about one of the recent awards I received from the Canadian Ethnic Media Association, the Best Podcast News Award, and just a little bit about Dr. Vibe. And right from the first time I spoke with her on the phone, I said, you know what? I want to help you any way I can. And I want to help you win. So tonight we have a young lady who I feel is a budding superstar in the Canadian media scene. So let me give you a little background. Rhea Lisondra is a Carleton Journalism and Humanities alumna. I thought you used to say alumni. Okay. As a journalist, she hopes to give a platform to unrepresented voices. She's a reporter at Street Voices, which is a great online publication. Please check it out, streetvoices.ca, and New Canadian Media. She is also the co-host of a podcast called the AZN Connection. I was told to be correct with that, so I don't want to get Rhea mad at me. So she's going to be on our show tonight, and she's going to be on in a few seconds talking about a great article she wrote called Action Needed to Resolve Canada's Growing Anti-Racism Problem. So we'd like to welcome for the first time, but not the last time, Rhea. We're going to bring Rhea onto the stage. Rhea, what's going on, Rhea?
I'm good. How are you?
I am blessed, highly favored, a magnet for miracles, and a solution for someone's problem. And you know what? I knew, as I said, from the first time I met you, I said, somewhere in your career, somewhere in your journey, you were going to be here. And look at that.
That's right. I really do appreciate you taking the time to have me on today. I really appreciate that.
Absolutely. And I think it's an interesting day for a number of reasons. Yes, it's a significant day with the George Floyd, Derek Chauvin trial in regards to racism, police conduct, etc. But racism isn't fixated to one culture. Racism is an issue that many of us experience, not just people who look like me and people who look like you. So I thought, and we didn't plan it this way, that we're talking about racism today, but maybe a racism that a lot of people aren't aware with and about. And one of the goals I always want to do with this platform is educate and inform, inspire, and definitely the education and the information that you're going to provide for us tonight will be very meaningful, I think, to many people who are watching and listening to our conversation. So thank you for taking the time.
Of course.
Good. Well, let's find out about life before you were a journalist. So, like young Rhea, what was young? Well, you're still young, but you're much young. You're probably much younger than me. But where you grew up, life growing up, etc. Can you share with our audience?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I guess like if we go way back, I was born in Manila, Philippines. So my family immigrated to Canada when I was fairly young. I came to Canada when I was like about 1, almost 2 years old. And I was raised in a small, not so small town now, actually, but at Trenton, Ontario. I'm not sure if anyone listening is familiar with that area. But in growing up in that area, it was pretty predominantly white at the time. So anyone who was like not a non-white person, I probably would have known of them. Like there were very few of us growing up, and that honestly influenced me a lot to be in the field that I am in now, because I had always felt this sense of wanting to build representation that I couldn't find in mainstream media, and that really pushed me to wanting to be in journalism. And now I got my start going to Carleton. So I know we were going to start with like how I'm not my early days before journalism, but really I feel like those early days kind of lead up to my identity as a journalist.
Wonderful. Can you just share some of the challenges your family had growing up? And I know Trenton, been there, but some of the challenges that your family had growing up in Trenton. And by the way, I have a special love for the Philippines. I have there's some wonderful close people in my journey who are from the Philippines. So I do relate, and beautiful place and beautiful people. So thank you for that.
Yeah. Well, struggles were, I feel like, something we didn't really discuss. And I think that's something a lot of Asian people can resonate with. I think there wasn't really something as part of our culture that allowed us to really talk about issues that affected us. I think for me, my general impact, or my general like thing that I can take away that was a struggle, was just trying to fit in, knowing that I was in a town where I was always going to stand out because I didn't look like the other kids, or I didn't act or eat the same food that they did. So I kind of had this weird identity crisis of like knowing that I wasn't going to fit in with the kids at school, but then at home, I didn't really fit like the idea of being completely Filipino either. So there was this weird internal struggle of being like not Canadian enough or not Filipino or Asian enough. But that's one struggle that I can think of for myself. For my own family, their struggle was more like trying to work as hard as they could in a country that didn't, you know, find their education and their skills and experiences out of Canada valid. So they worked very hard labor jobs their whole life to try to get me into a better school. So that was more their struggle that I can think of.
I can actually relate to what you're saying in regards to not being having an identity crisis. My cultural background, both my parents are from Jamaica, and they basically said like, you ain't one of us. But looking the way I do, a lot of people in Canada say you're not one of us.
Mm-hmm.
So I can understand how you had that internal challenge and also external challenges probably that you had to deal with, and also having the challenges in your like just day-to-day living. How did you deal with it? How did you overcome it?
I think the best way I can say like I overcame it is just the way my parents and my family raised me. They were always very proud of where they came from, and despite working hard and like maybe not having the most glamorous life, they did teach me to be proud of coming from that. And that one day, working hard, you'll get to somewhere better in life. So that was the main motivation. Is just, it might be hard right now, but it should be better later.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
What qualities, and people who watch the Dr. Vibe show, I always ask this question because I think it's very important. What qualities have your parents instilled in you that you carry on today?
That is a great question. Yeah, wow. I think one of the main things my parents have always tried to teach me is to be strong for myself. Because growing up, I definitely was more of like a very sensitive, and not that that's a bad thing, but I was a very sensitive child, and things would really get to me if I couldn't do things properly the right way. So I really thank my parents for, not giving up on that and teaching me like it's okay to feel that way, but you have to keep moving. Like you cannot just give up on yourself right away and let things get to you. So I think, to sum that up, I guess like a sort of resilience or like a fighting spirit to try to get through things, even though they may be difficult. Another thing is that they really valued or like taught me to value um, standing my own ground and working hard despite, maybe not having the best hand. Like I was saying earlier, my family worked really hard. I don't really come from a rich or, wealthy background. So, and I was kind of in social circles where people did come from well-off families. And that also kind of made me feel like I stood out and was a little bit different, but they definitely taught me to not let that get to me as well, and to just do what I can with what I have.
Excellent. When you made the decision to take journalism, you know where I'm going with this.
Yeah.
Okay. So you and I are relating. We're like doing the telepathy thing.
Absolutely.
What was your parents' response when you said, "Oh, I want to do journalism because I have a feeling, I'm not making an assumption, I just have a feeling that it didn't get 100% approval."
You're not wrong.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was first met with like a little bit of backlash, I'm not gonna lie. Like there was a little hesitancy, but it was justified. Like I had chosen to be announced that I wanted to be a journalist at like a really rough time for journalism, like around the same time where, there was a lot of stories coming out about journalism people being attacked or targeted. And like I was right there in the middle of it being like, so I want to be them. And my parents were like, why would you do that? But I kind of showed them the reasons I had for wanting to go into journalism. As I mentioned earlier, the whole representation thing, loving to see and learn about other people's cultures and stories and wanting to share that with others. And they came around to it eventually. There was still some hesitancy when I like went to journalism school, that they were like, I don't know about this idea, but they eventually came around.
Was it their concern that, oh, you're not in a profession? Or was it concern that, oh, we are concerned about your safety? What were your parents' pushbacks at the time?
I don't think it was about a profession. I think my parents very much respected journalists and journalism. And they often, which I found funny, is growing up, they often talked very positively about journalists, which
Okay.
might have, influenced me to be like, maybe that's a career I could take. I'm actually just thinking about that right now, but that might have been an impact. They always talked positively about the field. But when they heard that I wanted to be in it, I guess there was a mode of protection that kind of came in, because I am their only child as well. So there is that factor.
Ask about that. Okay. Good stuff. Good stuff. Then how was education? Like, actually, do you remember the first day you went to school in journalism school? Do you remember your first day?
I do remember my first day. I remember the orientation and the first actual day of classes and everything being like so hectic. And I remember being very nervous as well. Yeah.
And the day you graduated, tell us about that day.
Well, I graduated last year in the global pandemic, so I didn't have a graduation. I finished my undergrad in my bedroom, which was like so weird.
Why does that sound interesting? I finished my undergrad in my that'd make a very interesting movie title.
Yeah, it was like very underwhelming conclusion to like some of the most memorable 4 years of my life, but like it was crazy to graduate into, the global pandemic in a field where people already questioned its stability. So that was interesting for sure.
Can you give us a moment during your studies that was really tough and you overcame it?
Yeah, I definitely remember immediately, like first year was probably the toughest time for me for a lot of different reasons. Like I had never been far away from my parents. So like I said, I was, raised in Trenton, and Ottawa is like a good 3 hour drive
Yep,
away. I had
exactly.
never been apart from my family. And I had never really done anything on my own because I was so sheltered being an only child.
Right.
Um, so I was going through a lot of transition of like I had been in the same place for so long, I had been relying on the same people for so long, and now I'm on my own. And I definitely went through that thing that a lot of students do when they're in high school, where they were like used to getting good grades, and then they hit university, and like it's a whole other level. Yeah, exactly. Your grades sink, and I remember being like so disappointed in myself about like the grades that I was getting because I had not been used to getting those grades. And I remember thinking like, I'm not going to make it because there's like a cutoff, right?
Sure.
For journalism in Carleton, there is a cutoff at the end of the year. And for a split second, like I didn't make it. Like I did not make the cutoff into second year. And
Wow.
I remember like freaking out, not wanting to disappoint my parents when they already were like iffy about this career.
Sure.
But somehow things worked out and I got a letter to come back. So I was like out, but then I was back in. And that was a relief on me. Like that
Sure.
moment kind of changed everything. And I remember just working so hard after that to never be in that position. So that was a really tough point in my university experience.
Nice. Well, thank you for sharing that part of the journey, because a lot of times people just look at the end product and they don't know what people had to go through
Mm-hmm.
to get to that end product. There's so many different directions I can go here. Like I could talk about, you know, hmm, let's okay. There's so many different things. So I'm gonna talk about the yeah. Let's talk about the articles. I was gonna talk about what you feel about the state of journalism and all that. We'll
Mm-hmm.
save that to the end. Let's talk about your article.
Sure.
You know, action needed to resolve Canada's growing anti-racism problem. Why did you write it?
Good question. I wrote that because it had been something that had been more relevant as time was going on. Like I'm gonna say, like the Asian community was aware that something was happening very early on in the pandemic. Um, and I remember talking to my Asian friends who are part of the AZN Connection podcast, which I'm sure we'll get to later. We were talking about that a lot, about how if they had experienced anything, if people in our circle had experienced anything, if we felt like it was ever going to go away, if it was going to get worse. Like I remember these were conversations in our circle, but despite our community talking about it amongst ourselves, it wasn't really talked about in mainstream media. And I had joined Street Voices couple months, maybe a couple weeks before I had started to write this article. And this was like the first article that I pitched to them that I wanted to work on, because I just felt like it was weird how slow the mainstream media was to catch on to this story. Um, so I had been working on this story for like 4 weeks, trying to get into research and trying to get people to speak to me about it, to put the article together. And surprisingly, it got a lot of attention. So I was very happy to see that.
Well, I don't know if it's surprising, because obviously racism is quite the catch
Mm-hmm.
issue these days. Let's find out. So it took you 4 weeks to write the article. Take us through the journey of writing. Was it easy getting information? Was it easy to speak with people? Were there
Mm-hmm.
any bumps along the road getting this to where we see it today?
For sure. I was in a weird spot when I first started like reaching out to people because, as I had mentioned, like not a lot of people were talking about it. But by the time I was writing this, it was getting more attention. So the people that I was trying to reach out to were very busy because other media outlets were catching on finally. Um, so I remember like trying to reach out to people, but then they were busy because of other media outlets, and then I'd have to like keep following up with people, getting the police to get back to me about any reports that they had or what they were doing. I remember one of the sources in the story, who is the co-founder of the project 1907 that provided data for the report that I'm talking about. I remember reaching out to her like from the start of the month, and then I had to keep reaching out to her because she had gotten like drowned in requests from media because it suddenly got so it got picked up a lot now. So everyone that I was trying to reach out to was now getting interviewed, whereas when I first reached out to them, there wasn't a lot of people yet. So there was a weird scheduling conflict with that.
What do you feel, or what do you speculate was from no interest to lots of interest? What do you feel there was a reason behind that?
I think it was, and I kind of hinted at it in the article, as that the tragic Atlanta shooting that happened, where 8 people died, 6 of them being Asian women. I think that was the point in which people started to realize this was a huge issue. Before then, I think whenever it was anti-Asian hate incidents, before then were kind of treated as like this happened over here and this happened over here, but like there was never a connection of it being a bigger issue. It was just like a string of single incidents that happened throughout North America. But it wasn't until a bigger tragedy hit that people finally realized that it wasn't just singular incidents. This was a growing problem and a pattern.
I'm going to come back to the article. I'm going to put it up on the screen so people are watching it. Yes, if you're not watching it, I'm just putting the article back on the screen because I want to go through some of the stats that you share in this article. So 600 anti-Asian hate crimes. This is in Canada, folks. Just want to make you aware. 643 reported cases from March 10th to December 31st, 2020. 73% verbal harassment?
Mm-hmm.
That's high.
That is the most common.
When you saw, and I'll ask it now, I could ask it in the end. When you saw these figures, how did it impact you as a journalist? And how did it impact you as Asian?
As a journalist, I saw these numbers and was like, these need to be reported on. I don't see these numbers, anyone talking about like these stats ever. All I hear is that it's just this incident here and this incident there. I'm not seeing the statistics of how many incidents happened in the past, couple months, and how many of those, what are the breakdowns of who was affected and how. I felt like this was important information as a journalist for the public to know. And as an Asian person, I wasn't surprised to see the numbers. I think that this is something I already felt was true without seeing the stats. Like I had a feeling just from like family conversations of those who are in areas where they're more likely to happen. Just conversations from that alone, I felt like, yeah, these statistics make sense. These numbers make sense to me. And it's unfortunate.
And over the reporting period, 59% were women.
Mm-hmm.
That's crazy. And then 84% East Asians. And a very interesting thing here, the majority of incidents took place in public spaces. That's pretty brazen to be doing this.
Yes. But one thing that the report points out, and I was trying to figure out a way to put this in the story, but I guess I can share it now.
Sure.
They felt that statistic showed that a lot of discrimination against minorities or people of color is to restrict them from access to public spaces. Like they do not want to see people in public spaces, and that they believe that maybe one of the motives as to why they happen often in public spaces. It's to show that publicly they don't want you there, or they don't want you in Canada in general.
And as I'm looking at your numbers, the numbers here more deep, giving a deeper dive, 49% in public spaces, 70% in grocery stores or food establishments. That's still to me a public space. Then again, 10% public transit, 8% public stores. So when I went to school, 49 and 17 is 63, 63 and 18 is 81. Wow, I still have a computer in my head. So the large majority of these cases happened in public places.
Mm-hmm.
That's crazy.
Yeah, and
Like people,
unfortunately, like nobody steps in. From the reports that I was reading, a lot of the times, like no one helping them. They're just kind of on their own, or have to just walk away from it on their own. And I just don't understand how you can treat someone like that in public or in private.
yeah, well, that's, yeah. And got a comment here from Twitter. Racism as a whole around the world has not been addressed to be rid of it.
Absolutely.
It's good stuff. Thank you, Real Django. Very big supporter of the Dr. Vibe show. Uh, when you did this article, were there any moments that made you say, wow, that really impacted you, that hit you emotionally?
I would have to say a lot of the things that hit me emotionally were reading the report, because they not only had statistics and suggestions and recommendations to address the issue, they also had quotes from the people that reported these cases, anonymous, but they're still people who experience these things. And a lot of those quotes, just remembering them makes me very emotional, to think that this could have happened to anyone I know. And this, in fact, did happen to people in my own community. So it's just heartbreaking to hear words that were said to these people, things that were done to them in public, even though people were watching. Like, I have no words for it. That is something that kind of really hit me home, like hit home for me.
Sure. I can tell you're a little bit emotional speaking about it, sharing about it today. So I appreciate your being open and honest with the audience. It's appreciated and not taken for granted. What was one or two memorable moments in doing this article that you can share with our audience?
One memorable moment was speaking with the police, where it's kind of like a thing I knew probably wouldn't really happen. And I was right. I just got a lot of email statements and data that the police had collected, and no one really wanted to talk to me personally.
Were you surprised?
No, I wasn't surprised. I saw that coming. But what I was surprised was when I had contacted the Ottawa police station, and somebody who was a fellow Raven called me and told me to call, or like, I guess, told me to call them to talk about it. So he was a source I mentioned in the story. He is he's a sergeant of the hate and bias crime unit there, and he had a conversation with me about, like, he's trying to figure out how to get people to report it, because he understands that it's going unreported. It's heavily unreported in Ottawa. And I remember having a conversation with a police officer about that. It was very eye-opening to me that he took the time, when so many other police officers I had reached out to, or police departments, just kind of gave me statements or emails, which I appreciated at least. But it's very different to have a phone call about it, and to have him feel like he understood what I was coming from, or where I was coming from, and trying to have a conversation with me about how he could help in any way. So that was a memorable moment for me.
Yeah, and I want to just sit on that for a second. Was it that these incidents were not being reported, or were they being reported and the department is not doing anything with the reports, in your opinion?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I can't really say if they're not doing anything with the reports. I don't have that information. And if I had asked, I don't know if I would have gotten an answer.
Yeah.
But I do know that it seems they understand it's going unreported. And I think a lot of police departments did tell me that they understood it was being unreported. But that does remind me of something that Ellen, who had said in the story, I'm not sure if I included it, but she was telling me, like, why is it that the police don't realize that this information, like reported information, is here? It's just not being reported to them, right? Like, they have that information. These organizations have the data. This just may not be reported to their local police.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Another feedback from the audience. David Hughes from Australia saying, people are cruel. Difference ought to be celebrated, not demeaned. For me, there is no them and us. There are only we. That is definitely that's David, the David I know. So thank you for that comment, David, and hope all is well in Australia. And Actually, I'll pull something out. I just started watching one of my favorite shows tonight, MasterChef Australia. I'm a huge fan of that show. So nothing just happens, David. Yeah, that's like one of my favorite shows. Absolutely. So hope all is fine with you and your family, David. This is good. This is good. Did you receive any pushback from any sources or people while doing this story?
Thankfully, no. I think the only pushback I really had where I was trying to talk to people who actually experienced an anti-Asian hate crime, and I was trying to find people who were willing to speak about that. And as anyone who's read the article, I couldn't really find anyone willing to, and I wasn't going to push anyone to share. I feel like this has to be something that they are willing to talk about, and it is a hard subject. So I understand that not a lot of people wanted to come forward about that. So I think that was the only issue I really had.
How easy was it to pitch this story to Street Voices?
I would say pretty easy, especially because Street Voices really does focus on helping and empowering or amplifying voices who are marginalized or underrepresented. So this story was definitely in line with what they wanted. So there was no issues. It was approved of almost immediately.
Very nice. When you finished that story, how did it feel?
It felt rewarding and it felt good to have it done because I think there was a part of me mentally working on a story that's like very sad and kind of hits home for like 4 weeks can really do something to you emotionally. So it
Yes.
was good to have it out of the way, but it was very rewarding to have it done and up and see the people's responses to it.
Nice. Would you say of the stories you've done, this has been the most personally and professionally impactful?
I would say so far, yes. I think this is one that is in line with what I wanted to do as a journalist, something that's more hard-hitting news. And it's something that fulfills for me personally in my identity as well, to be able to bring light to an issue that's impacting my own community.
When did you tell your parents about the story? And when you told them, what was their reaction? And what was their reaction? I'm not making an assumption. Have they read the article?
um,
Oh no. Rhea, don't do that to me, Rhea. Come on
okay.
now. Don't make me out to come to Trenton and show them. Come on now.
So I remember telling my parents that I was working on the story, and they're very used to me working on things where they're like, okay, those are hard-hitting topics, like they're used to that. So they weren't surprised that I was going to talk about it. They had no concerns. They were a little impressed that I went for it, actually. So that was good. A good feeling that they were like, okay, she's actually going for something where she might have to talk to the police about it. So that was intriguing for them. When the article came out, I actually I don't think they read it, but I remember showing it to them. I'm not sure they read through the whole thing yet.
You better be careful, because if I come into Trenton, I'm going to find out where they live. I'm going to say, knock, knock, and just say, look at my screen. This is your daughter here. This is my screen.
Yeah. My parents, they have a lot going on. They're still very busy, just working. So I understand they don't really have the time to read the full article. But I kind of gave them the summary, and they were very impressed by it. So that's good. I shared it to my social media. A lot of my family members shared it, so I got some good feedback from my own family who enjoyed it.
Congratulations on that, by the way.
Thank you so much.
That's huge. And offline, I think I'm going to see if I can get it put on some other publications. So I think it's
appreciate that.
Very, very important. I want to shift to, what is life like in the Asian community, have like day to day? Because obviously this story shows a part, and a lot of people like David in Australia, other people like Rio Dango in the United States, hear about Canada being racism. Canada, like what's going on here? Like it doesn't. We're known as a good country per se. What are some of the day-to-day challenges that you maybe personally or the people you spoke with in the story have to deal with when it comes to racism in Canadian society?
I think I can speak for my own experiences
Sure.
that like one of the struggles I felt was almost like an imposter syndrome because of the stereotypes like Asian people face, and I'm sure you might be familiar with hearing some of these, is that a lot of the times Asian people are expected to excel and do well in certain subjects in school. So I remember if I did well in school, it wasn't ever like celebrated the same way my peers would be celebrated if they did well. I would just be met with like a, oh well, you were supposed to be good at that because you're Asian. So like your own victories are never credited. They're just downplayed because of a stereotype. Or if you fail, it's downplayed or it's like made fun of even more because like, oh, you're Asian, you were supposed to do well. I did better than you. Like you get put down further. And I remember, this weird like if I'm not doing well enough, then I'm not like Asian enough, or if I am doing well, like that doesn't matter because I'm Asian. So it was like this really weird imposter syndrome, I guess is the best way I could describe it. And that's just like one factor, and I'm sure more people have other things that they can identify as a struggle. Um, or just the fact that like sometimes people just don't think you speak English. That was another thing. I remember like being in my local Walmart in Trenton that I had been in my whole life, essentially raised there, and being approached by a lady who asked me if I could speak English. And I didn't really know like how to respond other than being like, yeah, of course I do. Like,
Wow. So
mhm.
got some encouraging words from you here. Real Django says, I'm reading more of your articles right now, Rhea. I'll be sharing more on Twitter.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
We have a good family. We got a good family here, Dr. Vibe Show. Uh, your parents and the elders,
Yes.
uh, what do they think about this issue? Is it something they even talk about compared to maybe your generation? It sounds like you talk about it more.
Mhm.
Do the parents and the elders ever talk about it at all?
I think it depends because for me, I come from a family that is very aware of the news and they follow and all those things. So I grew up having those conversations with my dad specifically, and my mom would join in when she could. But I guess it's very different from each like house to house because
Sure.
I had that experience, but then I talked to my friends and their parents like don't know about it, or they don't really talk about it, or they try not to think about it. So it is different for different people.
Wow.
Mhm.
I want to move on a little bit to the whole area of journalism.
Sure.
And uh, you're a graduate. Yeah, 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 yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
What are some of the current concerns you have? And you can be as comfortable, or if you don't need to want to talk about this, but what do you have any concerns about the lack of coverage of this subject in Canadian journalism? And if you do have a concern, do you have any reasons why we're not hearing about it more?
I do have a concern that
Yeah,
not even just Asian issues, I think just like any like marginalized group I feel is underrepresented in mainstream media. And we've had a lot of these conversations on our podcast as well, and just with other friends in media. And I think for all of us really, it just kind of stems from we believe that it's just the people in power. So, like in mainstream media, the people at the top are just not diverse enough or open enough to take on stories that are part maybe of the focused on the Asian community or the Black community or any other community. Like, we just think that those higher ups don't see news value in those community stories. And that's something that needs to be changed.
what if the media landscape was the way and you wanted it to be and look,
Mhm.
what would it look like? If you had the ideal, if Rhea had the ideal vision of the Canadian media landscape, what would it look like?
That is a tough question. I think my main like place where I'm going with that in my head is that it's just overall more diverse in racial identities, sexual identities, gender identities, just so that we have, those stories being represented. So if we don't see people in that space, we won't see those types of stories being told, because there's no one to understand why that story is important, or no one to have the knowledge of like how to be sensitive about these issues while still reporting on them. So I think mainly, and I know this word is overused, but like diversity is kind of the main goal. And I don't know how to really define diversity in a media landscape that would be, satisfactory for everybody, but just like aiming for it in some
Sure,
way.
sure,
Yeah.
sure. I want to transition to the AZN Connection podcast. See, I said it right.
Yes, you did.
Tell us how it came about and what is it all about?
Sure. So I actually wasn't a part of the show in the initial discussions. So the start of the show actually starts with the other two co-hosts, which are Jeff Tram and John Gallardo, who are two friends of mine from journalism school. And they had known each other a bit longer in the Carleton Journalism School landscape. And they actually had their own sports podcast previously that they're still working on.
Mhm.
They were kind of in the talks of, being Asian identity, and like not really knowing that much about it, or not seeing that much about it. And they decided they wanted to do their own podcast about it. Um, and they also started looking for another voice, so it wouldn't just be the two of them. And so John actually had reached out to me and told me about the idea and that they were looking for someone else to come on. And that's how I joined them. So I became a co-host
Nice.
with them.
What was the first episode about that you were on?
Yeah, so that would be like the very first episode we did, which was
Okay.
just introducing ourselves, the concept of the show, and just about like growing up Asian in Canada.
Okay. And are you enjoying it?
Yes, I very much do enjoy being a part of that podcast. It is something that we are as a team very passionate about and very excited to see it grow.
And what type of topics do you cover on the podcast?
We cover a lot of topics. We have like a master list of things we covered or want to cover. So it's really a range. We do interview style. We also do conversational styles of topics. So we've done stuff about Asian racism. We've done stuff about growing up Asian. We've done stuff about, what it's like to do the celebrations like Lunar New Year or Chinese New Year or Filipino Christmas. So far, those are some popular episodes people have listened to.
Nice, nice. Uh, Give us a special moment from the podcast so far that you've experienced.
Mhm. I think my special moment would probably be like right after we released the first episode, and it was just the three of us talking about, our plans with the show, and who we were, for our audience to know who we were, and just seeing that initial response and seeing people get excited about it and sharing it. That was a special moment for me.
Nice, nice. Uh, tell us the experiences, or what are younger members of the Asian community, what's going on in their hearts and minds in regards to when it comes to racism, or the individuals that you come in contact with, what are their thoughts of what's going on in the landscape when it comes to anti-Asian racism? What are they thinking? What are they wanting to do? How are they handling it?
I think I've seen more younger Asian people now more than ever taking a stance. And, as I was mentioning earlier, there was this kind of cultural feeling of like, just don't talk about it, just keep your head down. But now more than ever, I see people talking more, and people posting more. People maybe I didn't even suspect in my own circle to talk about it, are now talking about it. And that's been a great thing to see. In terms of what they want to do, I think it's mainly they just want to bring attention to it, and they want to have people be aware of this issue. Because I think from conversations I've had, a lot of us feel like just a lot of Canada just doesn't realize it's happening, or they had no clue. I remember when I posted the article, I did have a couple friends who aren't in the Asian community did express to me they had no idea it was happening at this scale. So
Mm,
that's one of the things that I was hoping to do, was to bring attention to it.
yes.
Mhm.
Well done. Well done. Have another comment here from David in Australia. I'm a little shocked that there is an anti-Asian racism problem in Canada. In the United States, I see it and read about it. Canada, I didn't know. I see it in Australia. We have a rising white supremacist problem here. I'm a father to an adopted child from Central America and have seen racism firsthand. When my son was small, I speak up against it. Some of my quote so-called unquote friends don't like it. That's about them though.
Mhm.
Do the Asian community feel they're getting support from other communities, or is this something they feel that they're bearing on their own?
It's like for me, I remember the first half of 2020 when this was happening. I felt like we were having our backs, like people were turning their backs on us. I felt like other minority communities, like, and I'm not saying all of them, right? That some
Sure.
people did speak up, some people were aware, but I saw like a really upsetting amount of posts on the internet, kind of justifying the racism towards Asian people. And I'm not, and I understand where they're coming from, where they're saying that, like, Asian people don't really talk about other issues outside of, Asian issues. They're too focused on their own. And I get that. And that is something that needs to be addressed in our own community for sure. But it was something in the beginning that I think people just didn't really want to talk or help. But I think now, as time has gone on and it's being proven that like this is a real issue, I think more and more people are coming on and talking about it that are not of the Asian community.
Wow. That's it's tough. This is tough. This is very, very tough. And
Mhm.
it's something that's not
Mhm.
obviously being recognized as much as it should be. And it's
Mhm.
really, I'm disappointed. Let's put it that way, that things are not better. Uh, as we keep on going here, let's go back to the world of media. You're a graduate.
Mhm.
How is, and obviously this is your passion.
Mhm.
What are your thoughts of the Canadian media landscape these days, especially for young people like yourself?
Mhm. I mean, to be honest, I never really had much hope for the Canadian media landscape as an undergrad
Okay.
student. I very much felt like I would have a struggle to be a part of it. I didn't think after graduating I would be in the media landscape at all. I kind of thought I would be like, I don't know, an airline stewardess for a little bit. Like I was thinking of other career paths just in case. And I remember like as soon as I was already thinking that before the pandemic. So as soon as
Sure.
like the pandemic hit, I was like devastated that I was, plans for even just a non-journalism job were kind of out the window. But in a weird way, the pandemic kind of did give me a chance to work on journalism safely. So that is something that I'll give them. I do work from home as a journalist, so I'm very
Sure.
thankful for that.
Sure.
But there are some things about the media landscape that I question if sometimes if I really want to be a part of mainstream at all, actually.
Uh, do you feel going your own route, being an independent, or maybe going outside of the Canadian landscape is where your future is if you want to pursue this journey?
I can't really say. Like again, I you just never know
Sure.
how life takes you or where the
Sure.
world will go anymore. So I think it's kind of
Sure.
hard to say for sure. There's
Okay.
just like an element of needing to adapt. So if it has to be, going on your own way and doing independent things, such as the podcast, so be
Mm-hmm.
it. And I do enjoy that podcast as well. But and if I do end up in something more like I guess stable in mainstream media, that is a possibility. Who really knows anymore?
Okay. David from Australia says, "Where can I read the article, please? I can talk about it at in my Toastmaster groups." So, David, what I'm going to do is after we finish, I will DM you the actual link for the article, so you'll have it within the hour. So you will make sure, and I know that Rhea appreciates your interest and your support, both
Mhm.
yourself and Real Django. But that's all we're about. That's what the Dr. Vibe family is all about. We support each other whatever way we can.
Mm-hmm.
So, and he says, me too, doctor. Thank you. Much appreciated. Absolutely fantastic. So, how did the gig come with Street Voices?
Through a friend. So, like, as I was saying, Jeff, who is a host on AZN Connection, actually started at Street Voices first. And then he then brought on John and I as part of the media team afterwards. So that's how that started.
And how are you enjoying it?
It's been good. It's been a good chance to write more. When I was in my other position, I wasn't really writing as often just because there were more tasks to do involved with that position. But this one, I've been able to explore writing more and just kind of doing more interviews and speaking to people. So I've really enjoyed that.
Fantastic. Fantastic. This is good. How has the pandemic treated you journalistic wise?
It has been weird because I'm so used to, the Carleton journalism kind of ingraining it in your head to be like, you have to meet people in person in order to get a really good interview. And I've been following that like my whole time in school, but like during the pandemic, it's just been meeting people over the phone or on a Zoom call. And although that is good, it's just kind of not the same as like being able to interact with people in real life and seeing their spaces, like whether that's their office or their home, to learn more about them and their environment. So that's been one thing the pandemic has kind of hindered on, or being able to take their photos for the articles as well. That's been, kind of not happening anymore.
No, not really happening at all. We're going to start winding it down here because I know you've had a long day, so I don't want to keep you all around for too long. What is one of the biggest misconceptions non-Asians have about Asians? One that you hear about all the time that is just not true.
I think that's a hard one. I can't really think of one off the top of my head that is like a major misunderstanding. Oh, I think one misunderstanding for me is that they feel like they'll have nothing in common with us. And I think that's a major thing. I think more people feel like Asian culture is like too different. Like they're not gonna find something similar in their own culture. But I think if you have a conversation with any Asian person about their culture and their family, you'll find something similar, something to relate to.
I think that's so true. And I'm going to bring a little of my journey into this. And I think when you and I spoke a while back, folks here, when I was younger, I had hair, I used to do a lot of refereeing in the Chinese and Filipino community, and so many great times, so many great relationships. And I really want to build on what Rhea just said there, that the more you know about people, the more you need to know. We have more in common than we don't think we do. There's a lot of things. Most human beings have a number of things in common. They want people to be better. They want to treat people with respect. That's not a cultural thing. That's a human thing. And Filipino people love to have a good time. I like to have a good time. They're very, the Filipino people I know, very family oriented. Very, very family oriented. So 100%. I think that exists in some other cultures too. I don't think that's just a Filipino thing, So I'm just saying that Rio Django saying communicating with others is so important, Dr. V. Absolutely. Much respect. So Rhea, you wrote this article. We've touched on it a little bit. I didn't want to get too deep in because I want people to read it. What are some calls to action you would have for not only people who are reading this article in Canada, or in fact globally? What are some calls to actions you would like to share with some people when it comes to anti-Asian racism? Excuse me.
Sure. The first one that came to mind was just educating yourself. I think the main issue of anti-Asian racism is that people are just unaware, or uninformed. And I think the one action that I think everyone is capable of doing is just educating themselves, bringing themselves out of that bubble, reading more about issues that affect people that are not like, that don't look like you, just so you can be a better ally to them.
Nice. Very, very nice.
Mm-hmm.
And David is saying all people are 95% more similar than they are different. I agree with that. It's a very good point. Very, very good point. So, young lady, closing thoughts before you rock the house tonight. What are some closing thoughts you have for our audience?
Just thank you so much for taking your time to listen to me today. And thank you, Dr. Vibe, for having me on to talk about myself and the article. I really appreciate it. And I just hope that if it's not just anti-Asian issues, I hope everyone does read about something that doesn't impact them and learn more about other people.
Excellent. So for people who are watching live on the replay, I'm putting up her Instagram handle, and it's at RHEA LISONDRA. On Twitter, it's at RHEA_LISONDRA. The podcast, AZN Connection Podcast. And then you can reach a lot of her great stuff at streetvoices.ca. That's streetvoices.ca. Rhea, as we said before we went live, I didn't know it would end up like this. But thank you for reaching out to interview me. And I said to you then, and I'm going to say now live and continuous, anything I can do to help you personally or professionally as you go along your journey, we're here to serve. Because we want to see you and you win and your community win. Because if they win, we all win. So
I'm very thankful for that.
Thank you so much. And I'm putting it out there. Anytime you write a story, we want you here. I'm being serious.
Sure.
We want you here. You have a home here.
I'm very happy to hear that. Thank you.
All right. Take care.
You as well. Thank you so much.
It is the Dr. Vibe Show, the home of Epic Conversations. I'm the host of Epic Conversations. 2020 Best Podcast News in 2018 Innovation Award winner given out by the Canadian Ethnic Media Association. That's how I met Rhea. She did an article on me, and I am totally jacked still that was done. Just want to say a few things before we jump off here. I'd like to say thank you to Real Django and also to David Hughes from Australia for watching and supporting live. And other people watch, but I forgot your name. It's my head, not my heart. So a few things. If you want to reach with me or touch base with me, there you go. The drvibeshow.com is the best place to go. All things Dr. Vibe there. And as always, I will close off with this. Live your life as a dream if you can dream it. Sometimes you have to get small to get stronger. Block assumptions, then aim bigger, aim better, aim higher, aim wider. Let me just say here, we've got some final comments. People still coming in with the comments. It's beautiful. Love it. We got David Hughes. Real Dango is clapping applause. And also win-win. Thanks again, Dr. Vibe. Stay safe and stay well. Appreciate that, family. And as I said, my last things, love, faith, and respect. And also remember to give yourself grace. I don't know if I said it, but I'll say it again. Live your life as a dream. If you can dream it, you can make it. Sometimes you have to get smaller to get stronger. Block assumptions, then aim bigger, aim better, aim higher, aim wider. God bless. Peace and well. Keep the faith and walk good. And especially these days, stay safe. Stay safe. We're in very interesting times physically and other ways. So we just want to make sure you do good. Bye-bye, everybody.